Hey guys, welcome back to the readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is pro-revenge story. Landlords are a-holes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in 2015, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch and the owner, Marco, took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "The landlord drives everyone nuts," I replied, setting down my fork. I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Richard, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on sight. "How bad is it this time?" I asked. "Worse than usual. He's been showing up unannounced, harassing my staff. Last week he complained about the music volume when we barely had any playing," Marco said. "In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out if you're late with the rent. Instead, they just change the locks, and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord, Dominic, had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent," Marco said, "and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old." He showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. "You do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked. "Because this is a bit over the top, even for our a-hole landlord. He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus he's giving me grief over the vault." "He won't let you take it with you," Marco laughed. "Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons, and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it, and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. Dominic says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue." "Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as Marco said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal. The original documents dating back to the early 2000s when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. Marco had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then, I thought about the a-hole landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called Marco. "I'm ducked, right?" he said. "You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask." "I can save you, but it's gonna cost." "How much?" $8,000 in legals, and another $1,500 for the agent." "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me." "That's a lot of money," Marco hesitated. "But I'm looking at what? 50 grand to move that vault? And that's if I can even find someone who knows how to do it." "Exactly. Think of it as an investment." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Richard's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" he asked, looking up from a thick stack of documents. "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Richard for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. "You pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Yep, but nothing that will get you into trouble." "That's what you said last time," he grumbled, but reached out for his tablet and started scrolling through his contacts. "I know a guy," he said. Richard knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent, Eli, a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. "This is a bit unusual," Eli said, pocketing the money. "But I like unusual." "Just stick to the script we discussed. Make it believable," I told him. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. Marco saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said, his face tense. "Why? For lunch? And to be an a-hole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. "We're making demand on the landlord," I said, between bites of a perfect carbonara. "Demand? What are we demanding?" I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. "We're demanding that the a-hole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant." "The lease exempts all that stuff," Marco told me. "He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course I don't want that." I shook my head. "You need the vault," I said, "and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days." "Wait, what?" Marco stared at me. "You think you can beat Dominic with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? Trust me, I've dealt with guys like him before. They're predictable when money's involved, and if it doesn't work, we'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now." Marco dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. "You already gave it to him?" he said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. "Relax," I said. "This is going exactly according to plan." "What plan? You haven't told me any plan." "Let's see what the landlord has to say," I told him, and we walked over to Dominic's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating a rack of lamb wolfishly with his hands. "My client needs an answer today," I said. Dominic looked up at me as he chewed noisily. "I'm the vault's lawyer," I said. "I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements." Dominic swallowed a large chunk of meat and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Your client can forget about the bank vault," he said, wiping his massive, greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. "But you can't do that," I said. My shock was feigned, but Marco's jaw dropped for real. "The lease clearly states," I began, but Dominic cut me off. "I don't care what the lease says. That vault isn't going anywhere." The landlord laughed at us. "I'm the landlord. I can do what I want." "I'm gonna need that in writing, because my client might sue," I said. "Sue all you like," the landlord told me. "Sue till you're blue in the face." He told me that I'd have a formal response by day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to Marco. "How the hell did you do that?" he asked, staring at the letter in disbelief. "Trade secret," I said with a smile. "Let's just say I know how guys like Dominic think, greedy and short-sighted." "So that's it? I'm off the hook for the vault removal?" "Better than that. You've got it in writing that he's claiming the vault as his property. He can't sue you for leaving it behind now." The following month, the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place The Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Richard collared me. "The landlord's looking for you," he said, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Oh yeah? What about?" "He's really angry. He said his deal fell through." "Deal?" "He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a fintech startup or something like that. They were supposedly going to use the vault as a secure server room. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up." "Imagine that," I said, unable to hide my grin. "And what's that got to do with me?" I said to Richard, and I said the same thing again to Dominic when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. "I know you were behind this," he said, his jowls quivering, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullcrap. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that ducking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue." I leaned back in my chair. "Sue for what exactly? You put it in writing that the vault belongs to you." "That's not what I meant. I'm afraid the courts tend to go by what people write, not what they meant to write. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you." He stormed off, slamming my office door so hard that the frame shook. But Dominic didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I'd drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Richard's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad "for rent" sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. Last I heard, Dominic was trying to find a company that specializes in removing 100-ton bank vaults. Good luck with that. The next one is an entitled people story. I own a small cabin about 3 hours north of where I live. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place on about 5 acres of wooded property that my grandfather built back in the day. I inherited it and have been using it as a weekend getaway spot for the past decade or so. The cabin sits pretty far back from the main road, down a long dirt driveway, so it's nice and private. Last spring, I had to travel overseas for work for about 6 weeks. It was a major project that couldn't be postponed, so I made sure to winterize the cabin properly before I left, even though it was already warming up. I shut off the water main, unplugged everything, locked all the doors and windows, and put up my usual security measures. I'd left the place alone for extended periods before without any issues. When I finally got back home and had a few days to recover from the jet lag, I decided to head up to the cabin to air it out and get it ready for summer. I should have known something was wrong the moment I turned onto my driveway and saw fresh tire tracks in the dirt. When I got closer to the cabin, I noticed smoke coming from the chimney. My first thought was that maybe there had been some kind of emergency and someone needed shelter, or perhaps the local sheriff had used it for something. But as I pulled up, I saw a beat-up minivan parked next to my cabin, along with kids' toys scattered across my front yard. Someone was living in my cabin. I sat in my truck for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I got out and walked up to my own front door. Before I could even knock, the door swung open and a woman in her 30s stood there looking annoyed that someone had interrupted her day. She had the audacity to ask me what I wanted. I told her this was my property and asked her what she was doing in my cabin. That's when she called over her shoulder for her husband. This guy comes to the door, and instead of looking embarrassed or apologetic, he crossed his arms and told me that they had moved in and were claiming squatters' rights. He said they'd been there for over a month and had established residency. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told them they needed to leave immediately. The wife laughed and said they knew their rights. She pulled out her phone and started reading off some nonsense about squatters' rights and adverse possession laws that she'd clearly copied from some sketchy internet forum. Her husband chimed in, saying that if I wanted them out, I'd have to go through the proper legal eviction process, which could take months. They claimed that since they'd been there for over 30 days, they were legally protected tenants now. The husband then demanded that I provide them with written notice of eviction, following all the proper legal procedures. He insisted that I had to give them at least 60 days' notice and go through the courts. He was so smug about it, clearly thinking he'd found some loophole that would let his family live rent-free in my cabin for months while I jumped through legal hoops. I stood there and listened to their whole speech about their rights and what I was required to do. The wife even threatened to call the police if I tried to forcibly remove them or shut off any utilities. She said that would be an illegal eviction and I could face serious penalties. They had clearly done some research, or at least enough to be dangerous. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I smiled and told them I'd be happy to follow the proper legal procedures they were demanding. The husband looked pretty pleased with himself at that point. I pulled out my phone and made a call right there in front of them. Now here's what these idiots didn't know. The cabin isn't classified as a residential property. It's registered as a recreational hunting cabin on agricultural land. This classification matters a lot. I'm also friends with the county sheriff, who I'd called to let know about my situation. But more importantly, I'd done my homework on property law when I inherited the place. I told them I'd be back in 2 hours with the proper documentation they demanded. The husband nodded and said they'd be waiting. I drove straight to the county office and the sheriff's station. When I returned, I had the sheriff with me, along with a county property inspector. I also had something else. My original property deed, my property tax records, and documentation proving the cabin's classification. But most importantly, I had printed out the exact statutes they had demanded I follow. Here's what these squatters didn't understand about the laws they were citing. Squatters' rights and adverse possession laws in our state have very specific requirements. First, the occupation has to be open, notorious, continuous, and hostile for a period of years, not weeks. Second, and this is the kicker, those laws explicitly don't apply to recreational properties or hunting cabins that aren't someone's primary residence and are clearly marked as private property. I had signs posted at the entrance to my driveway and on the cabin itself clearly stating it was private property and no trespassing. I also had the locks they'd broken to get in, which I'd installed before I left. The sheriff took photos of the damaged locks while the family watched nervously, but I wasn't done with my malicious compliance yet. They had demanded I follow proper legal procedures, so that's exactly what I did. I had the property inspector cite them for multiple violations. They'd started a fire in the chimney without having it inspected, which was a fire code violation. They'd reconnected utilities without authorization, which was illegal. They'd dumped garbage on the property without proper disposal, violating environmental regulations. The inspector found they'd also been dumping sewage improperly since they didn't understand how the septic system worked. Each violation came with a fine. The sheriff added charges for breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and property damage for the broken locks. The husband started backtracking immediately. He claimed they didn't know it was occupied and thought it was abandoned. The wife tried to say they just needed a place to stay and had made an honest mistake. But the sheriff wasn't buying it. He'd found evidence that they'd been watching the property and knew exactly when I'd left for my trip. Here's where it got even better. Because I had followed their demand to pursue proper legal procedures, everything was documented officially. The sheriff explained to them that because of the criminal charges and code violations, they needed to vacate immediately. This wasn't a civil eviction anymore, it was a criminal matter. They had about 30 minutes to gather their belongings and leave the property. The husband tried to argue, but the sheriff shut that down quickly. He explained that by breaking in and causing damage, they'd never had any legal right to be there in the first place. All that stuff about squatters' rights only applies if someone enters a property legally or if there's some ambiguity about ownership and it's been years, not weeks. Breaking someone's locks and moving in while they're overseas doesn't establish any kind of tenancy. I stood there and watched as they frantically loaded their stuff into their minivan. The wife was crying, the kids were confused, and the husband looked like he wanted to punch something. But here's the thing. I'd done exactly what they demanded. I'd followed the proper legal procedures. I'd gotten the authorities involved. I'd documented everything properly. The malicious compliance was beautiful because they'd insisted I had to go through official channels, thinking it would protect them and buy them time. Instead, going through official channels meant involving people who could see through their scam immediately and hit them with criminal charges and fines that totaled several $1,000s. Before they left, the sheriff served them with a court summons for the criminal charges. The property inspector handed them citations for all the code violations. They also had to pay for the damage to my locks and property immediately, or face additional charges. The husband tried to claim they didn't have any money, but the sheriff told them that was their problem to figure out. As they drove away, the sheriff and I walked through the cabin to assess the full damage. They'd been living there for just over a month and had treated it like garbage. There was trash everywhere. They'd broken a window, stained the carpet, and damaged the kitchen counters. The septic system needed repairs from their misuse. All in all, the damages came to about $4,000 on top of the fines they'd already received. I filed a civil suit against them for the property damage. Because everything had been documented by the sheriff and property inspector, it was an open and shut case. I won the judgment, though actually collecting the money was another story. They clearly didn't have much, which was probably why they'd tried to squat in my cabin in the first place. The best part came a few weeks later when I heard through the grapevine that the husband had been complaining around town about what happened. He was telling people that I'd illegally evicted them and violated their rights. Someone who heard him whipped out their phone and showed him the court records, including all the criminal charges and code violations. Apparently, he shut up pretty quickly after that. I also learned that this wasn't their first attempt at squatting. They'd tried similar schemes before in other areas, but had usually been chased off before things got official. By insisting I follow proper legal procedures, they'd actually created a documented criminal record for themselves that would make it much harder to pull this scam elsewhere. The whole situation cost me time and money to repair the damage they'd caused, but it was worth it to see their plan backfire so spectacularly. They'd thought they were being clever by demanding I follow the law, assuming the legal system would protect them and give them months of free housing. Instead, actually following the law exposed them as criminals and hit them with consequences they'd never anticipated. I've since upgraded my security at the cabin with cameras and better locks. I also check in with my neighbors more regularly, even though they're pretty spread out in that area. The sheriff's department also keeps a closer eye on the property when I'm away for extended periods. Looking back, I almost want to thank that entitled family for being so insistent that I follow proper legal procedures. If they'd just apologized and left quietly when I first showed up, they might have gotten away with just trespassing. Instead, their arrogance and their demand that I do everything by the book meant they ended up with criminal records, thousands in fines and damages, and absolutely nothing to show for it except a hard lesson about how the law actually works. The first one is a petty revenge story. Okay, y'all, it's been a crappy week for me, and I was just not having it anymore last night at the grocery store. I meander through the aisles buying my Corona snacks, which I already ate. Shocker. And I know I need toilet paper. I hit up the TP aisle to see 6 24 packs of Charmin. I was stoked. In stock, and the good stuff at that. There was a middle-aged Karen on the phone standing in front of the stack, so I stupidly wait my turn to grab a pack. Boy, was I wrong. This crazed poop paper hoarder proceeds to look at me, take all 6 packs, put them in her cart, and just roll the duck away with a smirk on her face. I almost crapped myself. Good thing I didn't, because there was no TP left. Now, as I mentioned crap paper, Karen was on the phone. She was complaining to someone about how this is the second store she went to, and they better have baby wipes, because a-holes who don't have kids should not be buying baby wipes when people like her need them. You guessed it. My asthmatic ass sprinted over to the baby aisle all wheezing and crap. I put all probably 20-something containers that were left of wipes, even the ones on the very top of the shelf I had to climb for, in my cart, and I waited. Sure enough, crap paper Karen comes strolling down the aisle, looks at the shelves. I can see her start to get mad, then she sees me. Cart full of snacks and baby wipes, face grinning ear to ear like a crap-eating jack-o'-lantern. Before she can say a word, I wheel my ass away with pep in my step and my petty satisfied as hell. Now I'm not a complete monster, so as soon as she left the aisle, I went and put all the packages back where they went. But man, the satisfaction was epic. I nearly died of a shard attack laughing. But it's a good thing I didn't, because I still have no damn TP. The next one is a malicious compliance story. For the last 10 years, I've been working from home as automation engineer for a relatively small company what produced custom-built industrial gas treatment units, industrial chillers, compressor stations, that sort of thing. My job was to write algorithms for PLCs, design HMI, and setting up data transfer for customers' SCADA systems. Basically, I was the person who told machines what to do. I was getting significant below-market pay for such position, but with only 4-5 projects per year and each taking me 2-3 weeks to complete, I wasn't arguing, since I was getting paid for mostly doing nothing, and I was fortunate enough to have considerable passive income thanks to lucky investments of my inheritance. Everything was great until a couple years ago, when owner decided to retire and sold the company. So here comes new management with new policies. In my country, every worker entitled to at least 4 weeks of paid vacation time per year. All unspent vacation is rolled over to the next year, but you have to take at least 2 uninterrupted weeks per year. So if you only take your mandatory vacation, you accumulate 14 additional days per year. Given how much free time I actually had, I rarely used more than mandatory 2 weeks per year, always making sure there be no commissioning or maintenance planned during my vacation. During these events, I would remotely access maintenance engineer's laptop to make necessary adjustments to the algorithms, so everything works perfectly in real working conditions. But one of the first policies new management implemented was schedule-based vacations. So now O had to decide when I take my 2 weeks at the start of the year. I chose first weeks of April. In early March, I get a call from manager of the development team who asks me to come on a quick 3-day work trip to help maintenance engineer switch PLC and upload new project. Apparently, thanks to new maintenance team manager, a lot of maintenance engineers quit, and they are short-stuffed, and the only one they can send ATM is bad with computer. Where isn't much for me to do since we had identical station going through the same PLC switch month prior, so I'll just fly there, chill, until electrical panel is rewired, new PLC is installed, when I just upload new project to PLC and fly home. I thought for myself and agreed to go. Apparently, maintenance engineer not only bad with computers, but also knows nothing about electrical work, so I had to do everything myself, which I am not actually qualified to do. But at this point, I don't want to disappoint client, who turned out to be a bunch of really nice people. So after a week, and with only 3 burned down fuses, I finished. After returning home, I informed my manager what I am not going to any more business trips, since I don't get paid enough to also do maintenance engineer's work. First say of my vacation comes, and I get another call. Despite my poor judgment, I decided to answer, "Hey, we need you to go on another business trip starting next Monday. It will just take a week. For this project, I'm not familiar with that project. It was done while I was on paternity leave. In my country, either parent can take maternity leave up to 3 years, and after first 6 months, my wife asked me to switch. Yeah, we had to contract a specialist to do that project while you were on leave. I'll send it to you along with documentation right away." Disconnects. I check received project and it is huge. 7 PLCs, 6 HMI panels, everything has to work as a single system, and project is a total mess. Nothing would work. You just has to do everything from scratch. Will probably take me close to a month to finish. And that is with doing everything from comfort of my own home where I am more productive. So I call back, "Yeah, I looked at this project and that's a mess. It's not in the working condition and no way to finish it in a week. I'll do what I can do, but as I said last time, I'm doing it remotely. As always, I won't go on another business trip. Especially now, I have many things planned for the next few weeks. I can't go. But reception on site is terrible. You won't be able to access it remotely." And we already missed all deadlines on this project. Client is pissed, and we are looking at huge fines. CEO is breathing down my neck. We need it fixed yesterday. Then I'll email maintenance engineer project with changes each evening once he is in hotel with decent reception, and he can email me list of things what need fixing. It's not the first time we done it that way. Okay, I hear you. I'll have to speak with CEO About 15 minutes later, I get another call. CEO said, what if you don't want to go? You should just write a resignation letter. I am the only employee who knows how to do my job, but yeah, sure, I'll send my resignation letter right away. I was thinking about not doing it so they had to terminate me and pay me termination compensation, but when I decided to be petty in a different way, in my country you had to give at least 2 weeks notice unless both parties agree to shorter notice. So I write my letter and set my resignation day as 14th of April, which is 2 weeks. Shortly after it gets approved, did is done, and I get another call a bit later. So, will you be able to finish this project before you leave? I won't be able to do any work on that project before I leave. What? Why? You still have 2 weeks and we really need it done. Well, you see, I am on vacation right now. Last day of my vacation will be April 13th, and I am resigning on 14th. Fallout. I recently got a message from ex-colleague I have friendly relationship with. Apparently, they are in deep *T right now. Deadlines were missed, fines rolled in, and companies' accounts have been frozen. They even were unable to pay salaries for the last 2 months. They are probably toast, and if things go that way, they'll have to file bankruptcy. Don't worry, people will get paid in the end. In my country, salary deps have the highest priority when bankrupt business sell their assets. Downside? I still haven't received my compensation for my 120 saved vacation days. The next one is an entitled people story. My elderly parent lives in a townhouse on the grounds of an assisted living facility. There are approximately 24 townhouses like his in blocks of 4 homes in a row. All of them have a back garden with an inlaid brick patio separated from one another by essentially a wooden wall that looks like a giant shipping pallet skid. This wall extends the depth of each patio space and is stopped by a row of bricks that delineates the patio from the garden. Unless you live in an end unit or force yourself through the dogwood hedge that runs parallel to the back of these 4 home blocks, there's no way to really get in or out. The 2 middle units are basically as landlocked as a high-rise balcony. My parent has a host of mental health issues as well as being physically limited by certain health conditions, but they have always loved to fill bird feeders all year long. This means there's always piles of sunflower seed hulls all over the patio that don't always get dealt with promptly. My family and I were over at the unit today to celebrate parents' birthday, and we wanted to sit outside to eat the birthday meal. As soon as I arrived, I went to the back and started sweeping up the shells so I could get the patio furniture set up for everyone. The new tenants next door were outside on their patio with their friend who seems to come by regularly to help them, take them on outings, etc. I've never met the friend, but have seen her several times and only briefly met the new tenants. Anytime I have been visiting my parent and their friend pulls up, she makes sure to never make eye contact and just walk straight into the next door unit, which is fine. I honestly don't care one way or another and tend to be on the side of introverted myself, so I'm sweeping and I hear friend stage whisper, "Oh, there's someone sweeping next door." This fact is mentioned several times. I have my back to their patio as I'm working, but then hear a very obvious throat clearing noise. I ignore it. Friend repeats this twice more before coughing loudly. Twice. No. Hi, or excuse me, or sorry to bother you. Just as she's likely the type of person to snap their fingers to gain a waitstaff's attention. I continue to ignore her. My motto is, respect is given when respect is given, and throat clearing plus not bothering to attempt to he kind about getting my attention is not respectful. Finally, she tries a, "Hello, excuse me." So I turn around. She has stepped into my parents' side of the garden, around the wooden partition. Immediately she breaks into, "When you're done sweeping there, could you have some time to come and sweep up over here?" With a disgusting, saccharine sweet evil smile. I flatly replied, "I don't have time right now, maybe later, but I'm very busy today. Don't count on it," and turn back to my sweeping. I hear a barely audible harumph from her as the female resident says, "Oh, she's joking." Her body language was not joking. She definitely just expected me to jump at the chance to do more work. Not once was there a, "Hi, my name is X, I'm a friend of your parents' neighbors here and we could really use some help. Would you mind?" Her question was definitely more of a statement. Not 30 seconds later, the male resident steps around the wall and says in a stupid sing-sing voice, "Hey, is that Broomhilda?" Now, this man is 96. Normally I would laugh along with a stupid joke like that from someone his age, but I was in no mood. I ignored him. He tried the same line again. I just turned around and said, "Pardon me?" in my best confused voice. He repeated it a third time, and I scowled and replied, "Oh, no," and again turned back to sweeping. I hear the murmuring, and then hear the friend say, "Broomhilda. That's a kraut name, isn't it?" "Yes, it's definitely kraut." More murmuring, and another mention of kraut. My husband is a different ethnicity than I am, very visibly different, and we have 3 children who are then obviously mixed race. So, despite there being ample room on the patio for all of us to sit comfortably and admire the garden, I made sure to set up the table and chairs at the very farthest edge of the patio where it meets the grass, as my parent lives in an end unit. I didn't hear them say anything else, but my eldest daughter told me afterwards that she noticed the friend taking her time with the gardening she was doing for her friends, and really leaning as far into their garden as possible while trying to obviously conceal the side eye she was giving us. My daughter just stood still, staring at her face on. If there's one thing I've done successfully, it's to enable my kids to stand up and make other people uncomfortable for the staring we get as a family in this very vanilla white part of the country. Anyway,